The linebacking core, we are going to break down it all and talk about where Arizona fans should expect this team coming forward. But let's get started here on Locked On Wildcats.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, we've got a lot to get to this show, and I mean a lot to get to this show, but we're going to talk about the Arizona defensive line right now and where it could mean for this squad going forward. Again, you got to remember that there's a lot of different moving parts in place. Could still be adding some more guys, but right now, let's talk about the defensive line. Now, I think it's important to remember that with the defensive line, that might have been the weakest position that Jedd Fisch inherited when he took over. And there were many weak positions that Jedd Fisch inherited. But the defensive line, I think, was right there at the top of that list. And there were a million reasons why. But first, there was no size. And Jedd Fisch has said from day one that if they're going to miss with players, that they're going to miss big. And I think that is a great mantra and way of thinking about things. So let's talk about that. Up front, then you got a few likely starters. I would be very, very surprised if Duece Davis isn't starting. Duece Davis to me is, again, a little bit of an undersized kid. I get it, out of Phoenix, but he probably at that defensive end spot probably has the best bend, probably has the best, the proverbial flex off the edge that you don't see generally a lot of times with kids. And again, he's put on some good weight. He's still kind of small for sure, still a little small, but he is also a player who he's also a guy who, I think for lack of a better term can make some things happen out there. Now, I also think that from a sack perspective, he's going to really, I think, up that game a little bit there because I think you can get 6-7 sacks out of Duece Davis. Again, came in here about 215. He's probably about 240 right now, something like that. But, that's kind of where it is right there. Now, with who could be on that the opposite edge right there, it gets interesting. But first, we're going to talk about the defensive tackle spots right here. And now you got some options right here. And first, we need to talk about Big Tyler Manoa, kid out of UCLA, kid out of Cal. Obviously, some guys they just don't really find a fit with a coaching staff, and that's always, I think, that's something. But the great Bill Parcells would always say, never write off a player that somebody that was rated high, because that means that a lot of people thought highly of him at one point. That's where we're at with Manoa and some of these other players right here. But I do believe that Manoa is going to start at one of those defensive tackle positions, and he should start at one of those defensive tackle positions because, again, he's good, he's big, he's physical. There's just a lot to like about the young man, a lot to like. Now, so you probably again, I think he's going to be at one of those tackle positions. Then you got some other options right here. You got Tai Uiagalelei. We love Tai Uiagalelei on this show, and we love Jacob Kongaika as well. With Jacob Kongaika and Tai, I think it's fascinating because both those guys were obviously under the radar recruits a little bit. But not only were they under the radar recruits a little bit, they were the kind of guys who, they shouldn't have been under the radar recruits because of where they were. They played in the Trinity Leagues. And there should have been a reason. But both these guys are going to play. I would imagine that Ty's maybe a little bit ahead right there, but both those guys are going to play. I do believe though that those are going to be the two tackle spots right there. With Uiagalelei and with Manoa. That could all change, obviously, with some transfers in there. Now, with that other spot, it'll be fascinating to see what happens, though, because, again, we can't forget, you got Big Bill Norton in there. Big Bill Norton, our guy from Georgia, massive dude. Got to be the biggest guy on the team. And again, I'm going to keep saying this. I don't care that he did not play a ton at Georgia. Georgia is a different animal entirely. Doesn't matter to me that he didn't play at Georgia. He's still he's still good for what Arizona needs. And again, he's a massive dude right there that I think will allow some other guys to be able to do some stuff. Now, let's talk a little bit about the defense right here and what everything does, how everything does kind of come into play. Now, I will say that at that edge position, you're probably looking at Tyler Upshaw. Tyler Upshaw to me is a guy that, anybody, and this is generally my rule of thumb, is that with my rule of thumb is if you were good enough to start at Michigan or play at Michigan, you're probably good enough to play at Arizona. And again, Upshaw went to Colorado, and I get it. But at the same time, just because Dion didn't like him doesn't mean that he can't play here. I think he's going to either start or he's going to have a huge role on the defense right here. I think this was a very big get for Arizona. Now, some of the other guys then. So that's kind of your defensive line right there a little bit. But one guy, though, that I think has been slept on a little bit that I think could be a real problem in the future, and I love his upside, is Isaiah Ward. Now, Isaiah Ward, about 6'8", huge dude. But not only is he a huge dude, he's also a player who at probably about 6'8", 300 pounds, has a little bit of explosiveness, a little bit of bend, and he has flashed before as well. That's what's intriguing about him. Kid out of California. Again, hasn't proven a lot on the field, but when you watch the practices, he does stand out. He does stick out, and that is something that I think you need to keep in mind right there. So again, I think we definitely need to keep that one in mind right there. Now, I do think with the rest of this roster, then it gets a little bit fascinating because those are the guys, though, that you're really going to depend on. And by depend on, I mean, because of the linebacking core, which we're about to get to in a second, they're going to be playing downhill. They're going to be able to not only play downhill, but they're going to be able to, how do I best put this? You need those guys up front to be tying up blockers. And I think they're big enough to do that. Now, again, is the explosion there? I don't really know. And I don't think that anybody really knows that one. But, I will say that from that perspective, you got some sides up front to be able to keep those guys off. And that's what's exciting about it. And again, some of these guys that flashed a little bit, you also got to look at it. You got to say to yourself that, why can't they take that next step then? And I think that's where it's going to be fascinating. Can these guys take that next step? Because if they can take that next step, then it makes life a lot easier for them. Now, let's talk about the linebackers here, and we'll get back to the line in a second here. But I do think what's fascinating about this entire situation, though, is on that linebacker spot, Justin Flowe. Justin Flowe obviously coming in here. Justin Flowe needs to be that dude, in my opinion. He needs to be the guy that, as Greg Biggins has said, was the highest rated linebacker that they ever scouted here, or that they ever scouted in California. And that's something that I think obviously is a huge, huge aspect to what they want to do. Now, him playing downhill is going to be, let's be honest here, it's going to be important because he's a guy that I think has a real ability to be able to make plays and to get after and make some back-breaking plays, to be quite frank about it. That's what I think you want right there. Now, But he's gonna need these dudes to keep him, players off of him. But either way, it's not just going to be that, because you also need to remember, though, I think at some point, though, that yes, while let's be honest here. Some guys need a little bit of help keeping players off of them. He doesn't really need that. And not only does he not really need that, sure, it would help. But again, I would expect Justin Flowe to be an all-conference type player. Sometimes, again, you just need a little bit of a change. And there's nothing wrong with that. You see it all the time in life. You know what? Both sides want to do well, but they just don't really click. And I think that's kind of where everything is in the grand scheme of things. Sometimes things just don't really click. And obviously they didn't really click at the University of Oregon. That's fine. One man's trash, another man's treasure. We will take it. But again, he's been everything that Arizona coaches have wanted so far. And when you watch him at practice, he's automatically a leader. He's immediately a leader. And not only is he a leader, he's a guy that you can just tell kind of gets it and is definitely grateful for an opportunity to be able to show some other people what exactly he could do. So that's that. But again, and a big dude right there. He's a guy who, again, you look at him, he's probably about 6'1", 235, but man, he looks every bit the part of a starting NFL linebacker. And that is a reason. And there's a reason why, again, that he was rated so highly coming out. So, again, that's kind of where you're at with Justin Flowe. Then the other guy, Jacob Manu. Jacob Manu absolutely you could make the case, was one of the best. I'm not going to just make the case. I am going to make the case that he was one of the handful of best freshman linebackers in the country this past year. He was just next level. He was fantastic. And not only was he fantastic, he was just everywhere. Once Arizona put him into that starting lineup, he started making plays left and right. And I think that's where it was exciting for him, because not only was he making plays left and right, he just looked like the instinctual type of guy that is not going to ever come off the field. Now, Brad Allis has mentioned many times, he said the next step for him will be to be able to, start making your tackles a little bit upfield as opposed to backfield, kind of like where the safeties are. And I totally agree with that. That will be the next step for him. But if that does happen, then Arizona is looking at something right there where, you're on kind of an interesting playing field there, because you would have two legitimately big playing linebackers. And you got to remember too, with Jacob Manu, it's not like this is an extrapolation. Well, if he does this, he'll be able to do this. No, we saw it last year. Again, I'd like to see some of those tackles up a little bit more to the line of scrimmage. But, at this stage in the game, you take what you can get. Those two guys, though, are firmly entrenched in that at that starting, I believe, at those two starting linebacker spots. Now, another thing that is fully entrenched and should always be is FanDuel. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Check it out. FanDuel. We love FanDuel around these parts, because FanDuel.com/lockedon is where it's at. Now, you might say to yourself, what is FanDuel? What's so great about FanDuel? First of all, FanDuel is fantastic because it allows you to be able to make the picks that you want to make in real time or ahead of time. Props, you name it, they got it. FanDuel is where it's at. But not only is FanDuel where it's at, remember this, not only is FanDuel where it's at, but you can also be assured that your money is good after that, as it is a massive entity right there. So again, you don't have to worry about all that kind of stuff right there. So again, check it out. Now, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come right back with you. We're going to keep talking about the rest of the linebacking core and some of these other players that could maybe step up here a little bit. Thanks for keeping it locked on, Wildcats. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right. Now, let's talk about some of these other guys. Now, we talked about the defensive line up front, and we talked about the linebackers so far with Freudian slip, with Jacob Manu and with Justin Flowe. Now, the next guy that I think we need to look at is Leviticus Sua. Now, Leviticus Sua is not on campus yet, but this is a 4-star player out of obviously one of the most prominent schools in the entire country for for football, and he is not only is he good, he's a player who can I think come in. And yes, he's going to be coming in a little bit later. Don't love that aspect right there. Well, by later, I mean on time. But I think sooner or later, he's going to force his way into the starting lineup. I believe that he is that good right there. Not only do I believe that he is that good, I think that he will be able to how do I put this? I do believe that he is going to be able to probably force his way into that starting lineup. And there's a reason for it. It's because everything you look at on tape is next level with him. He is a guy who is, I mean, let's just put it right there. He could have played about anywhere in the country. He's another guy. He's about 6'1", 230, something like that. But he just has an ability to be able to make plays out there. And again, I think you put him next to Justin Flowe, you put him next to Jacob Manu, and all of a sudden you've got a lot of impressive aspects that you can deal with right there. Those to me are the 3 most talented linebackers. Those are the ones that I would certainly like to see out there. Seeing him out there, I think would be nice, but those are the 3 right there. Now, there are some other guys, too, that are kind of wild cards in all of this that I think that we need to keep an eye on. Now, another guy, obviously, Dalton Johnson. Now, I don't know exactly what you want to categorize Dalton Johnson. Is he a pure safety? Can he play in the box? But I like when he is in there because he has the capabilities of being able to just make plays. Now, it's been a long time coming, but if you watched him in practice, if you watched him in the scrimmage, his presence was very notable out there. It was very noticeable. And the reason that it was noticeable is because he was making plays left and right. And that's where I think it's very fascinating to see what he could do now going forward. But again, he's also an older guy right here. So we'll see exactly how he does play in. But you got to like what you've seen in camp. Now, another guy, too, that'll be fascinating to see what he does is Sterling Lane, Duece Lane. He came in as a 4-star type guy. And not only did he come in as a 4-star type guy, he, out of Oaks Christian, could have played pretty much anywhere in the country that he wanted to, came to the University of Arizona, hasn't really made that next step, that next leap yet. But I think it's certainly capable or certainly possible that he could make that next step and he could make that next leap because again, he's a big kid. He's naturally just a really, really big kid. And again, he can definitely play. He is like I said, he's just a big dude out there. And there's a lot to like about him. I do think that it's going to be interesting to see how he does fit. But so far, we haven't heard a ton about him. You'd like to see that change a little bit. You'd like to see him kind of make that next jump. All right, take a quick break. We'll be right back with you. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke. All right. Now, we have got a lot more to get to this show, but we wanted to just talk about the linebackers. We wanted to talk about the defensive positions because, again, there's a lot to like with this squad right here. And, I'm gonna stand by that. This team right here, I don't need you to be great, but I do need you to be able to probably be like 8th best in the conference, something like that, or 8th worst, whatever you want to call it. I just can't have you being last because of the offense, which we're going to get to tomorrow, is, I think, going to be more than good enough. But I just can't have you be last right there. So again, that's what we're looking for. And I think that there's going to be a possibility that will occur. So we'll find out about that one. But everybody out there, you have a great Monday. You have a great rest of your day. As always, keep it locked on Wildcats. We will be back with you tomorrow. And we'll talk to you soon. But again, back the A, and we will talk with you tomorrow.